Welcome to the Senior Housing Investors Podcast. If you are an owner, operator, investor, developer, or buyer of senior housing, you've come to the right place. The best way to stay connected with us is to sign up for our weekly newsletter at havensenior.investments.com. This podcast doesn't exist without you, our community. Thank you for listening, and reach out to us anytime.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kelsey Heermans, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's exciting conversation. Joining us as host is the fantastic John Haber, who will be leading an engaging conversation with none other than Amber Bardon, the CEO of Parasol Alliance. Amber is a visionary leader driving innovation and technology solutions for senior living organizations. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to John to get us started.
Thanks, Kelsey. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And you've had such an inspiring career. I've looked over your website and all the awards that you've received. Pretty amazing. Can you start off by sharing a little bit about your journey? How did you go from working in senior living to founding Parasol Alliance?
Well, thank you so much for having me, John. I've been in senior living for almost 20 years, which seems a little bit hard to believe. And as you probably know, people who are in this industry, they're lifers. So you meet a lot of people like me that have been in the industry for a long time. And I actually got my start working for a provider. So I came into a senior living community at a very entry-level IT position at the help desk, senior living community in Chicago. And I ended up working there for 9 years, and I got promoted several times. And that community happened to have every type of senior living services available. So home health, community-based services, hospice, HUD, AL, IL skilled, transportation, adult day, really everything that you can think of that's, on offer in the marketplace. And so just by doing projects and working with all the different departments, coming in third shift and training nurses, I got to understand the business side really well. And then through my evolution in working for that provider, got onto the leadership side and saw the real opportunities there are to have technology be seen as a partner to the organization to enhance the service offering, the staff experience, the resident engagement. And that's what led me to found Parasol Alliance.
And that was in 2015 you founded Parasol Alliance, correct?
Yeah, so Parasol Alliance was started in 2015. And as you probably know from being an entrepreneur yourself, a lot of what happens is based on who you know and your network and how critical that is. And I was introduced to the CEO of Chicago Methodist Senior Services, Bill Lowe. And I told him my idea to start a business in this industry. And he had the idea to go out and find providers to invest and start the company. And so he helped me go out and talk to different communities and different organizations. And the idea that we were telling all these different providers is that every senior living community needs technology. So why not own a piece of it and provide that service to yourself, and then also use that as a vertical integration strategy to go out and provide that service to the marketplace. And so that was really the concept behind Parasol Alliance, and that's where the Alliance and the name comes from. And we ended up with 5 different organizations that became investors and partners in starting the company.
Well, you now serve 45 communities across 9 states. You have 80 employees. You're expanding into Canada and the UK. What's been the key to scaling your vision so effectively?
I think there's 2 pieces to that. And I like to think of us as a disruptor. I think that we have a very different business model. And I think we're a disruptor on the services that we offer. And then I also think we're just a disruptor on the people that work for us and our culture. And I think those are 2 things that are very different, but I think those are the key to our success in different ways. And I can dive a little bit more into those. Is there one you want me to?
Yeah, so you deliver services like help desk support, resident IT assistance, security. Let's go into those services that you do bring to the table.
Yeah, so I just said a moment ago a little bit of a bold claim that I consider us to be a disruptor. So let me just explain what I mean by that. So when I started the company, I didn't really know anything about an MSP or managed service provider. I didn't really know what they typically provide or what they typically do. And when I decided to build this business model that we have, I really came at it from the perspective of what do senior living communities need and what do they not have today? And I got some of that information from my own experience, but also from talking to some of the other potential investors that we had, which was about 15 communities originally. And I asked all of them, what is the number one issue you have with technology support, whether you're in-house, outsourced? And they all said strategy was their biggest pain point. If their CFO was making decisions, they'd go to a conference, they'd meet a vendor, they'd buy the product. It wasn't successful. They don't know what they don't know. They didn't have the resources to hire a CIO. And so it was interesting that that was the biggest pain point. And that was also something I experienced at the community I worked for. And I had built a strategic assessment there. And so that became the core of our business model and part of our value proposition. So we begin every engagement with our clients with a strategic engagement, strategic assessment. And it goes way beyond just what you think of as traditional IT. And so our vision statement is actually transform technology culture in senior living. And the way we do that is really through this assessment process. So we look at every component of technology operations, business systems, network systems, security, all the low voltage nurse call door access cameras, all the resident technology and innovation. And we tile these things together in a roadmap that gives the community a step-by-step guide year over a period of 3 years of all the work that they need to do in those areas. And there's a lot of benefits to that. So that can become the IT budget. It brings people together in terms of resources and projects that we're going to agree to work on, because you see a lot of silos with this department doing that over there and this community doing that over there. So it gets everybody on the same page as far as what the vision is. And then it gives you a path to execute. So I would say our differentiator is that we start with that and then we work with our clients to execute that. We don't just have a break fix model.
If you went and surveyed, and you probably have surveyed your clients, you've been doing this for quite a while, what would they say the top three issues that they're currently having in today, 2024, 2025? What are the top three issues that they're having?
So the number one finding I have, having done more than 100 strategic assessments at more than 70 communities, is business systems. So a lot of times we'll work with a community or an organization and their IT infrastructure is usually pretty solid. Either they have in-house IT or outsourcing, and their server switches, all that is up to date. Not always, but a lot of times it is. But no one owns the business applications. And so what we're looking for there is opportunities to make sure you have the right systems, that you're optimizing the systems you have already, that they're integrated, that we're getting rid of spreadsheets, that we're optimizing processes start to finish. So for example, taking an admissions process and making that really efficient against the technology. Because a lot of people want to jump to innovation, but unless you work through this, you can't take advantage of a lot of the innovation out there. You want to use AI to generate reports and data and analytics. Well, if your information is all in spreadsheets, or it's on paper, or it's in 10 different systems and none of the data fields match, it's very difficult to get to that. So I would say business systems is across the board the biggest opportunity that I find. I think the second one is the technology culture at the organization, because a lot of leadership is not on the same page about what is the technology culture and how does that organization want to use technology. No one expects to spend less money on technology. Everybody is planning to spend more money on it. And not everyone is on the same page about what does that mean for the staff experience, for the resident experience, and how do we plan to address pain points. And I think that is something a leadership needs to get in alignment on and have a good plan moving forward. And then I would say the third one is security. I think I have to say that because it's just the world we live in today. And I think most communities are being pushed to security by their cybersecurity insurance companies, or they're just having the painful experience of having an attack or something like that, that they're starting to realize that this is a necessity.
All those services and what you bring to the table and your awards and your rankings don't come about easily. And so one thing that really stands out is your award-winning culture. Parasol Alliance is recognized as the happiest IT company and has received 28 Best Place to Work awards. That's amazing. Can you tell us what sets your culture apart?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I've done a lot of presentations and I've spoken to a lot of different groups about building culture. And I think there's a lot of specific strategies and tactile things that you can do when it comes to building a great culture. But I think all of those come down to just a couple of key ways of thinking about culture. So, first of all, you have to be very intentional about building culture and you have to have buy in from your C level. It's very difficult to implement a great culture if the CEO doesn't believe in it and they don't want to be a part of that. It can't just come from HR. I think the second thing is to take the time to listen. So listen and engage with staff. So I meet with every single new employee and I let them know about our financial performance, what our strategic goals are. I just personally take the time to talk to them and share information and answer their questions when they start. And then something else we do is we do town halls twice a year where we have mandatory meetings with every employee where we ask them questions about what are we doing well, what can we do better. So I think showing that you're willing to take the time to engage with them. And I have spoken to communities that are much, or even organizations that are doing this that are very large, that have 3 shifts, and some of their CEOs are doing this and they're coming in all 3 shifts and meeting with staff. So it doesn't just have to be an IT company that can do this. But the third piece of that is accountability and following up. So taking what you're hearing, being available to listen, but then telling them what you're going to do about it and then following through. So we take all of that feedback and we present it back to our team and we tell them what the action items are and then we report on that every month.
That's wonderful. And I noticed that you also give your employees their day off on their birthdays. Is that what I heard from?
Yeah, they get so we have a lot of little things we're doing, but we give employees their birthday off. We have unlimited time off. We also have a mental health day once a quarter that they get points in our wellness app for taking off a mental wellness day once a quarter. So a lot of little strategies like that we do.
You also use Slack. So tell me how you use Slack within your organization.
Well, I think the tools that you're using has to be part of your technology culture strategy. So you don't want to implement something like a Slacks or Teams without a strategy and policy on how to use it effectively, because otherwise it just turns into, sort of a free for all. And it can be something people suddenly have to check 24 hours a day and jump to immediately. And it can be disruptive or just ignored if there's no guidelines. So Slack is definitely a lifeblood of our company. So we are 100% remote. So as you mentioned, we're currently at about 80 employees. We've always been 100% remote. So we really have a lot of guidelines around the expectations of being on Slack, how you use it. So for example, we don't want any work done in Slack. So we don't want to ask someone to do something. There needs to be a ticket that you're linking it back to, something to track your time to go back to. I don't allow people to use Slack after hours. So we're a 24/7 company, but if you need to contact someone after hours, you are not supposed to post in Slack because I don't want people thinking they have to log in and check it. There's a list of to call them or text them or whatever their preference is if you absolutely need to contact someone after hours. So I think having a lot of those guidelines can help make the tool really effective.
What's interesting is that part of your culture also is a commitment to transparency, but also empowering your employees. And then you've implemented EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, which we also did starting in 2024, and in investing in ongoing employee development. When did you implement EOS?
Pretty much from the beginning. We were much
Wow.
smaller back then. We self-implemented. I love the EOS book because you read a lot of
Mhm.
business books and they're very generic. And it has such a step-by-step process guide on how to implement the framework. So yeah, we've always been EOS, some slight modifications to the way we do it, but I think that's been a huge part of our success.
And so what other areas of employee development have you implemented internal?
So we have a lot of those different engagement strategies, like I talked about with the town halls. We also do surveys. We have a wellness app. So people can actually earn points, which they can use to translate into money or gift cards and things like that. So that's where people get points for things like taking the mental wellness day, participating in different types of wellness activities, going to the doctor once a year. We also have something called Parasol Academy. So this is career development because, we want to give our employees a chance to grow. So we do two different types of mentoring. So every new employee gets a new employee mentor for 45 days. And that's just another peer for them to go to not have to ask their manager questions. We do new employee socials too. So we bring our new employees back after a quarter and ask them what they liked about onboarding, what can we improve. And the mentorship is the number one thing they really like. We also have a professional mentorship program. We built up a list of every single position in the company and then what skill set you need to be able to specifically move into that role so that it's very clear. I want to be a network engineer. I need to have these 10 skills. And we have a link to where they can get training so they can go learn how to do that skill. So it's a very clearly laid out career development path and it works. So we do promote people. And as people start to see that happening, they understand that if they, they put the work in, that they will see the promotion happen.
That's great. I mean, that number one, you're listening to them. You're giving them development opportunities. You're using the EOS system. You're running on all cylinders, and it seems like you're doing extremely well. So let's go back and revert back to your clients. And you're known for creating strategic roadmaps. I know we got into that just a tad, but let's talk about the future. Okay, so here you are. You're working with all these communities. How do you keep them abreast to the changing technology in the marketplace? Because as you know, over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, it's just going to explode in terms of the speed of technology and the use of artificial intelligence. So how do you use those roadmaps to achieve your clients' long-term goals?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think we hear a lot of buzzwords right now because a lot of this technology is emerging. So AI is a great one. I mean, how many conferences have you been to where people talk about AI? The thing is not a lot of people are successfully using AI yet. And I think that they don't, it doesn't mean one thing. There's so many things that AI could mean. So AI could mean that we have a note taker on this Zoom call that's taking notes for us. Or it could mean that you have, a data analytics tool that's giving you generative AI answers based on what's in your database. It could mean that you have a software like a resident engagement app that has AI built into it that's doing advanced analytics and reporting. So I think, how do we capture innovation in the roadmap? I like to think of it as a pyramid. So we need to make sure we're taking care of the basic IT infrastructure. Then we need to work on our business applications and make sure those are solid. We need to think about the resident technology, and then we have innovation at the top. And so I think when you build a roadmap and you have an IT steering committee, you need to think about it on a quarterly basis of what are the priorities this quarter that we need to do and where does innovation fall in that scale. So does it make sense to start a falls prevention project now or do something that requires Wi-Fi if we don't have Wi-Fi in our building yet? And so what are some of the things, infrastructure we need to do to build that so it goes hand in hand? As far as how we stay updated, so that's a little bit about help our clients know when to implement innovation and what innovation is right for them. As far as like what's out there, we also have a podcast called Raising Tech. So we have a lot of technology innovators on that. Going to conferences, we get introductions like on a weekly basis. We always have vendors new into the space coming to us because they've heard about us, wanting to let us know about what's out there. But again, I think you have to be careful because you don't want to get caught up in going out and getting something innovative without understanding the use case for it. How are you going to support it once it's in? Who's in charge of it? Like, what are the security risks? Like, I think it has to, you don't want to, like, I'm a certified project manager, so I'm very project management focused on what are the requirements? What's the use case? What's out there? And let's make sure that we can match these up together rather than just jumping into something.
Yeah, I spent 12 years in high tech years ago during the dot-com boom and such. And yes, you have to have that one person within the organization that's going to be the go-to person, the individual that interfaces with your team, or it just gets convoluted. No one knows who owns what, and the project never gets off the ground correctly. So, you exclusively serve the senior living industry with a full range of managed IT services. What unique challenges do senior living communities face in adopting and managing technologies outside of what we've already spoken about? And how does Parasol Alliance help address those needs?
Well, I think the big one that we haven't discussed is Wi-Fi. And I actually do a whole presentation called the Wi-Fi crisis, because I think this is a big area that no one really knows quite what to do about it. a lot of the technology out there is going to require enterprise wall-to-wall Wi-Fi, and it's very expensive. So we estimate $2 a square foot, and that's been pretty accurate in the projects that we've done. No one's really sure how to plan for that, how to pay for that, how to support it, how to manage it. And we see a use case for it both with the residents coming in wanting to stream and have Wi Fi available, but the technology we want to use both for staff and residents that can get them to the level they need to be. So I think, it all goes back to the roadmap for me to understand where you want to go and what you need to do to get there, including how do you design the backend infrastructure to support this technology.
Amber, you mentioned residents and staff in regards to IT. There's another third component that I've heard that isn't being taken care of very well, and that's those families coming in that are wanting to access the internet in the community along with telehealth, right? So, what have you heard on that side in regards to not only the resident and staff experience, but the family or doctor or whomever is coming to visit the resident?
I think that's a good point, and it isn't something that's talked about a lot. You're right. From a, community standpoint, having access to Wi-Fi and things like that, I think that goes back to the Wi-Fi piece. But I think this sort of brings up sort of a parallel issue in that I think a lot of the vendors in senior living need to come together and have better integration amongst themselves to be able to provide a comprehensive information to families and to residents. So you can implement a resident engagement app and a family member can have access to that to see what's going on there. But that doesn't always talk to the medical record system to see the care records, which doesn't always talk to the nurse call system or the dining system. And so I would really love to see the senior living vendor environment come together to help solve these challenges because everybody has their little piece. And then also understand the challenges actually in the communities that they're dealing with to have the infrastructure to support these systems.
I agree. I mean, especially in the rural areas. Can you imagine the challenges for an assisted living community that doesn't have fast internet, such as fiber or something else? How can they manage 70 different connections at the same time? And that's where you come in and you bring a great service to the marketplace, and it shows on how many communities you're currently working with. And so you're at the forefront of technology in senior living. What trends or opportunities are you seeing right now, Amber?
I just want to go back to a point you made because I think this is sort of part of answering your question. But I think that communities need to think about technology as a competitive differentiator. Every other challenge that we're having in this industry, we talk about workforce, we talk about just staffing, anything that's a major issue, dining, things like that, they all are going to come back to technology in some way as the solution. And I think that, going back to what I said earlier, communities need to start thinking about how they're going to address this. You talk about rural communities. How are they going to survive in competition with a community down the road that does have wall-to-wall Wi-Fi and they don't have that? And residents moving in want to have Alexa and they want to have all these things they have in their home today and they can't provide that. That's going to be a competitive differentiator amongst, the new wave of seniors that are coming in to these communities. So I think that's definitely something that they need to look for again, is just thinking about it differently. So transforming the way we think about technology as something that we're seeing out there, and that is imperative to have a plan in place. We talked about AI. I think that's a big one. We wrote a white paper on AI. It's on our website where we talked to all the vendors in the space and interviewed them about how they're incorporating AI. The other really big one we're hearing is falls prevention. And there's a lot of aspects to falls prevention. So again, I feel like people meet a vendor that does falls and they go out and buy it, but there's so many different components to falls based on the level of care, based on are you assessing pre-fall, during the fall, after the fall, monitoring. You have to consider all those components and again, make sure you're picking the right partner for what you need. And then I think the other thing we're hearing a little bit is like robot process automation and business intelligence, which I think has been lacking in our industry for a long time. And now we're starting to see some real solutions come out around that.
When you say business automation, what would you like to see? What are you seeing out there that you really like? And you don't have to name company names. It's just, what are you seeing in terms of the technology that excites you? You've been in this business for quite a while. You've been in the senior living space even longer. What are you seeing in 2025, either here or coming out in the future?
I think there's two parts to it. So there's process automation, and there are tools out there that can, automate processes for you. So example, you get a PDF from the hospital for an admission packet. It can scan the PDF for you. It can data enter the information into your EMR or whatever. I think there's some cons to those, and I think you have to evaluate them carefully. And some of the companies out there doing that haven't been able to give me examples of where they've actually been successful with that. And to me, this honestly goes back to the bigger problem I talked about with each vendor has a piece of what they do and none of them talk to each other. And so if we can just get the systems to talk to each other, I think it would solve a lot of that need for process automation. And then I think on the other end, it's getting the data out. So business intelligence. And so some of this can be AI. And then some of it is, dashboards, KPIs that sit on top of all your systems and pull your data out into one place so that you can see that information. But again, this is something I've seen a lot of communities try to do and have a lot of challenges with it because the data fields don't match or they have a lot of spreadsheets. And so this is where going back to my point earlier about the business systems have to be really aligned. And I would say I wouldn't try to build this in-house. I would outsource it to a vendor who has developers on staff and has a lot of experience because every single place I've seen it in-house, they've mostly failed at it and spent a lot of money on it.
It gets into making sure that that company you're outsourcing to has the safety and security required so that that data doesn't get compromised, right? HIPAA data and other data.
Yeah, I feel like it seems alluring to have this idea that I can buy Power BI and do it myself. And then you get down the road of having 3 Power BI people and not really getting very far. And I've seen it more than once because it is a little bit more complicated than you would imagine.
Any question that I haven't asked you that you would want me to ask you so that you can address it to our audience?
I think I would just, re-summarize, if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, where do I start or what do I need to do first if I haven't considered these things that we're talking about on this episode? The very first thing to do is to establish what your technology culture is, which I talked about earlier, so I don't need to recap that. But I think you need to have a conversation at the leadership level about where do you see yourself on the technology scale and where do you want to be? So that's the very first thing is because I've been at sites where I've been in a room with 10 people in leadership and none of them agree on that question. So it is an important thing. And then secondly is come up with your plan on how you're going to get there and make sure you're building out all the components that you need to do to be successful with that. And then thirdly, don't get swayed by something that's the latest and greatest. Make sure you vet it thoroughly and, make sure that that company is going to be around, that they're a good partner and that they are going to do, what's in your best interest and not just try to get you on, the latest thing out there.
Let's back out of IT real quick. And I just want to get you're in many communities. You have a podcast on tech. You're at conferences and such. Where are the opportunities for innovation in senior living?
The biggest opportunities are process and system optimization and integration. And then, workforce automation is a big one through technology, which is easier said than done in some cases, but there are opportunities that are coming out. So, for example, in skilled, it's very difficult to do because you have certain staffing counts you have to maintain and things like that. But you can do little things like a community in Indiana that's putting a sensor on the adult diaper so that the staff know when to change them so they're not having to manually check them all the time. And I think there's opportunities to streamline the back-end administrative processes of staff that can help with workforce that don't directly impact staff or jobs directly. And then I think the ability to start making data-driven decisions, by getting your data out, getting your data in accurately and then getting your data back out and then using that for your business. And I think lastly, just using technology to improve the resident experience. Isolation is a big one. Resident engagement is a big one. How can we help improve the residents' lives through technology?
Yeah, how can we get each one of our residents to have an Aura ring or a Galaxy ring or an Apple ring so that the technology can tell us 3 days in advance whether or not someone is starting to get sick based on the level of temperature of their body? Things like that. I think that being able to make a decision based on the data that you're gathering and being allowed to gather on that resident. So, Amber, it's been incredible hearing about your journey, your company's culture, and the impact you're making in senior living. And before we wrap up, what advice would you give to leaders looking to build a thriving organization like Parasol Alliance?
I mean, for me, it's all about that culture, like we talked about. And again, we are a service-based company. So, we're not manufacturing widgets and selling them. So our services are our people. And so that's another reason why it's so critical. But I just think that if your employees, you mentioned we want to be the happiest IT company in the world. And that's because when your employees are happy and they love coming into work every day, what they're producing is going to reflect that.
That is correct. So, Amber, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. Your company is really a shining example of how innovation and culture can create meaningful change in the senior living industry. So, for our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Parasol Alliance and the amazing work Amber and her team are doing, be sure to check out their website located, Amber, where?
Parasolalliance.com.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Have a great holiday season.